Divine greetings. Welcome to another talk with Netzarit Aset. Tonight we will be going into the fifth talk on the topic of Maat philosophy. So this is Maat philosophy part 5. And I always say this in the beginning. Hopefully, if you haven't had a chance to go and watch parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, after seeing this part, you will be inspired to do so. So we have essentially been going over the construct of Ma'at and how to take a practical approach to applying Ma'at philosophy to our lives so that we can help on an individual level, right? Help make ourselves vibrate on a higher frequency, and then by extension, help the world to do the same. So essentially, my art philosophy is teaching us the way of life, right? The true and divine way of life, the way to live in divine order. And so I'm excited about going into the next precepts. We have 5 precepts scheduled for tonight, and I would like to get through all of them. So we always officially open up with a libation, and tonight we're going to do a special libation. Yesterday was our first Our Martyrs Day. So essentially, we are creating a day to recognize, to honor, and keep the spirit and energy of our martyrs alive. And so yesterday marked the day that Fred Hampton was murdered. And for those of you who don't know who he is, I want to say is because his soul still exists. He he was a member of the Black Panther Party, and he was murdered because he successfully was able to bring together gangs in Chicago. He also joined alliances with white people in Chicago, and because of his amazing work, he became a target for the government, and so they killed him in a very heinous way. And so today, when we go over the libation, I want to take a moment to pause and honor him as well. And so that's the website, ourmartyrs.com. If you're interested, you can check that out later. And this is new, but when it's said and done, we really want to turn this into a movement. So let's jump right into the libation. I call upon the Creator that goes by many names, the Creator, the Sustainer of life, that divine entity that lives in all things. I thank and I honor you for this opportunity to share this wisdom teachings of Maa't. I pray that this teaching may help all of us, inspire all of us to do what is required to elevate ourselves so that we can help elevate this planet. I pour water and libation in your honor. I call upon the cosmic forces, the Nephilim, those entities, those forces that assist the Creator in keeping life moving forward. I ask that we are continually guided on this path, and that those of us who stand for righteousness and stand for Ma'at, that we are assisted, that we are given the tools that we need to be successful in this battle. I pour libation in honor of all of the Nephilim that work on behalf of destroying the enemies of Ra and restoring and maintaining Ma'at. I pour libation in honor of this realm, fire, water, earth, air. I pray that this realm is once again made whole, that it's purified, that we all may dwell in divine peace and harmony once again. I pour libation in honor of all of those martyrs, all of those ancestors that gave their life trying to make this world a better place. I pour a special libation in honor of Fred Hampton, a 21-year-old martyr who was cut down because he chose us, he chose righteousness over himself. We pray that his spirit may continue to push us forward on this journey. I pour libation in honor of all of my bloodline ancestors. I pray for light, peace, and healing for my bloodline. I pray for prosperity, love, joy, and peace for my bloodline. And for every bloodline, for the bloodlines of everyone that's on this call and those who will tune into this talk at a later date. I say, oh, okay. Okay, now we can officially jump in now that we have done the libation. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can jump right into the lesson. Okay, let's just fix this. Okay. All right, so can someone just let me know in the chat that they can hear me and see my screen nice and clear so I can get started? Okay, I got a yes. Thank you for that. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So this is Maa't Philosophy Part 5, and I talked about this last week. So essentially the title just means the study of the wisdom teachings associated with Maa't. And we did this special libation for in honor of all of our martyrs and Fred Hampton. So we are up to Precept 12. Again, these precepts are taken from the Papyrus of Ani, and this is the plate number, plate 31A, and this can be found in the Egyptian Book of Coming Forth by Day, and there's different variations of them, but these are typically found in all of the edited versions that's available. I think I may have I seem to recall in a previous talk referring to this glyph right here as a door bolt. Just, I guess, a faux pas. And when I was putting this together, that just came to me. So in case I did that, that's not a door bolt. It's actually this symbol here. So I just wanted to make it clear, even for myself. And this symbol here is just like two arms opened up, like, no, so it's like a denial kind of positioning of the arms, and that's why it denotes on, which means no or not. So it's like a denial, and the door bolt would simply be the letter S. So if I said that in a previous talk, I am correcting myself. All right, so we have the on, which we know by now is no or not. Then we have the thrym. Some people can roll their tongue. I can't. Which means to weep. to cause to weep, to lament, to mourn, or to express deep grief and sorrow, which can or cannot include shedding tears. And so when we talk about this concept of mourning, we're talking about a really deep sadness, kind of like, almost not quite depression, but it's just, you're just vibrating in a very sorrowful space. And then we have the ah, which in this case is denoting the I, the self. So the translation, from my perspective, will be I will not. And again, the goal is to get to the point where we can firmly say I have not. So for now, we will say that I will not. I will not cause someone else to weep. So what we're saying is not only are we talking about making other people weep, but we're also being cognizant of not allowing ourselves to get into this, sorrowful space, this weeping space. And of course, we know that requires spiritual growth, because we have been taught that certain things, are worth crying over or getting sad over, like if someone dies, or if, we lose a job, or, whatever. So this precept is also, talking about this being something that we want to work on, not allowing ourselves to get into, or to cause someone else to weep or lament or mourn or become sullen. I will not be in or cause grief, misery, and sorrow. So the interesting thing is, when we think about the other precepts that we've gone over so far, and even the ones that's to come, when we're not living in accordance to many of the other precepts, by default, we can lead ourselves into situations where we are down, and we definitely can cause other people to be in situations where they are sorrowful or weeping or lament. So even when we take a look at the culture that we were born into, when we look at the society, because as I've been saying throughout this talk, it's easy to just tell people, don't do this, don't do that, I will not do this. But if society isn't creating the atmosphere to help support that type of life, right, which is Maa't, then it can become difficult, and in some cases almost impossible. And so it's important for us to look at how society conflicts with these precepts, so that we can figure out ways to navigate around it, and then ways to also help push society back in alignment, back towards Maa't. And so when we think about the transatlantic slave trade and just what that has done to people of color, people throughout the Africa diaspora, we are still suffering today. And, that caused us to go through a very sorrowful period, even the Jim Crow era, even right now. So again, it's a societal thing as well as an individual thing. Every 30 seconds, another person becomes a victim of human trafficking. So it kind of like makes us think about that very first precept, telling us about the need to have a code of ethic, right? To have some morality. But the society that we're living in is so immoral that they say there's more people enslaved today than there's ever been on the planet. And I mean, I know for me, my mind can't even fathom that. I can't understand that when you think about the policing system, all the satellites watching everything. You would think it would be very difficult for this to happen, but yet it's happening. And then we know about, wars, with this country has been constantly warring with others, and other countries warring, leaving families broken, entire countries desolate. These are definitely ways in which this construct of causing suffrage and weeping is being acted out on a societal level. And then we want to bring it home a little bit, right? Because, we've all heard, spare the rod, spoil the child. And, even as a parent, I used that tactic. I thought I was supposed to beat my children because I was beat. But when we start looking at the world and the results that we have, right, that we've created from these type of tactics, it's like, well, are they really, positive in the end? We have people growing up with childhood trauma and things like that. Typically, it's the child that's getting beat at home that's bullying and making other children weep at school. So it's a trickle down effect. So that precept is even warning us about, making our children sorrowful and weeping through beating them. And so when you think about a precept like that, even on a personal level like that, from a parenting perspective, you can see when you look at something like this, why we have to go back and look at these tactics, because there's plenty of cases where people, they actually kill their children. I mean, I can't even imagine this beautiful soul being beat to death over potty training, because he wasn't, I guess, making it to the potty in time or whatever. But again, this is just showing us where we are as a society so that we can see how much work we have to do as a collective and as individuals. So when we think about just ways of the world today that we all are kind of like accepting because we don't really know what to do about it, oppression is a source of suffrage for people. Lies. We talked about that precept already, how lies can affect people's lives. Cheating, jealousy, poverty, murder, theft, abuse. All of these things are very much active, live and well in our communities, right? In our relationships, in our families. And if we are going to be serious about trying to make a shift, we can't just sit at home and listen to YouTube videos, telling us that we're great and meditate on the energy centers or the chakras. We have to really roll up our sleeves and kind of like do the work. We have to start assessing the situation and then coming up with tactics that are suitable for us as individuals, right, to make our contribution to the collective. All right, precept 13. All right, we have those, I know it don't look like it, but we have those arms again. So we have which means to eat, swallow, to devour. And I'm putting here, this includes the construct of a metaphoric consumption. So even though when we think about eating, we're thinking about physically putting something in the mouth. But when you read Kemetic scripture, they actually use that term to denote a metaphor of consuming, like becoming one with, fully observing, understanding the nature of something would also be considered eating or devouring it. And so we have these determinatives here that's bringing home the point even more than the word. It's not just about eating, it's also about speaking and the emotion behind it. Then we have this glyph here, which denotes the ib. For those of you who watch my talk on what is love, this should be familiar to you. So also in that talk, I talked about the heart being synonymous in Kemetic culture with the contents of the mind, right? The unconscious and the subconscious mind. And then we have so again, the self. So I will not eat, devour, or consume my heart or my mind. And I have this in italic because this is basically another rendition or a variant. I will not consume my heart, mind with desires and emotions. I will not make my heart, mind heavy with emotions and desires. So we're talking about the making the heart heavy. And when we look at the judgment scene, which we'll do in the next slide, the heart is being weighed against the feather of Maat. And we talked about, the feather being extremely light. And we also talked about it being symbolic. So if we have desires in our heart and, in our mind that are driving us to go after things that are not helping us evolve spiritually, that are not, helping the world evolve spiritually, then those things can consume the heart, right? They can make the heart heavy. And so this precept is talking about that. It's talking about being alert, being on guard, being vigilant about what you put into your mind, what you feed your mind that comes out on the other side as a desire, the things that you're yearning for, the things that you're waiting for or trying to get in order to be happy, in order to be peaceful, in order to be loving, in order to be joyful, right? In order to be content, all of those types of things. And so it's interesting because when we look at this judgment scene, and there's several plays of this, right? You can see it in scrolls, you can see it on temple walls. There's this, it's a composite of sorts. It's different parts of different animals, and each part is symbolic of an attribute or a nature associated with that animal. And we're not going to get into that for this talk. But this beast or creature is known as the Maa't. And the Maa't is the devourer of the heavy hearts in the judgment scene. So is there really a beast sitting there when we die waiting to eat the heart? No, but we had to create a construct that the mind could grasp so we can understand what's going on. So this is symbolic. So it's letting us know that at the time of death, if we have a heart that's still filled with all of these unfulfilled desires and yearnings, then that person will have to reincarnate to continue the journey of pursuing those desires until the heart becomes desireless, because that's what makes it lighter than the feather. What makes it light as the feather is to desire oneness with the Supreme Divinity, right? To have that desire will actually allow you to reincarnate in a higher existence where you can pursue that. But if you have other worldly desires, then the Maa't monster will devour your heart, which is almost kind of like that precept, because you kind of like made your own heart heavy with those desires. And so that's a little bit about this scene here and that precept. So the contents of the ib or the ab are our desires, which are formed as a result of our karmic impressions and our cultural programming. And this is so important because you can be born with some jacked up karmic impressions, right? You could have had a really rough like previous lifetime or some serious experiences in the duat while you were waiting to reincarnate. But if you incarnate into a cultural system or a program where they're teaching you that the greatest desire is to elevate the consciousness, right? To unify the consciousness with divine consciousness and be your most higher self, your highest self, your most divine self, then that can start eradicating those other impressions pretty quickly. But unfortunately, we did not incarnate into that kind of place. So we are inundated with other kinds of cultural programming that leads to more negative impressions, right? I mean, how many of us could honestly say that we wouldn't want to live like this, right? And so, again, these desires come through the cultural programming. How many people would want to live like a yogi on a mountaintop? Some of us would, but the majority of us would rather live like this, right? That desire to be rich, A lot of us are holding our happiness hostage to our financial situation. We believe as soon as we hit that lottery ticket, then we have the right to be happy and everything will be in order. And we know that that's not true. But if we don't come to that conclusion without actually getting rich and then realizing it, then that desire is going to stay in the heart and make the heart heavy until either we experience it and come to the conclusion, man, I got all this money and I'm still not, happy, because happiness comes from, within. It's a state of being. We talked about that in a previous talk. Or you come into oneness with some wisdom teachings like this, the teachings of Maa't, and you kind of like say, man, I see all these other people who got all this money and they're still crazy. Some of them are on drugs, some of them are killing themselves. So I'll go ahead and forego that desire. I can let that desire go, right? Then you won't be driven by that desire anymore. Or we won't hold our happiness and joy hostage anymore, waiting for the money. Same thing, right? That perfect person, we just swear that once we meet that perfect person, that will do it for us, right? So that's another desire that can make the heart heavy, especially if we can't seem to make these things happen, right? The perfect body. People are in the gym 24/7 trying to get the so-called perfect body. What happens if you can't? Are you not loving yourself? Are you not seeing the beauty in your own body, right? These are the things that, again, that precept is speaking about. What is in your heart making it heavy? What are you eating your heart? What are you allowing to eat your heart away, right? The dream job, right? Most of us people know that when you're not feeling good, you could go get a certain meal, right? Because you've been programmed, that this meal will make you feel good. And then we find ourselves going out and getting the food that's been advertised to make us feel good. And it's not making us feel good because our bodies are not receiving it well, right? These are not the kind of foods that allow us to have optimal health. So that leads to other problems down the road. And then again, the perfect family, things like that. This was a big thing for me, just wanting that so-called perfect family and desiring it until I finally had to, let it go and come to terms with, life is what it is. I don't want to reincarnate to get another shot at trying to do this. I'm just work with what I have. All right. So again, just trying to take a precept like that and make it come alive so that we can say, wow, I can actually start doing things to make that precept manifest in my life. All right. On Tehi or Tehi, which is to cross over, to transgress. And transgress means to go against the law, a law, rule, or code of conduct, an offense. And then we have So I will not transgress, turn away from the laws of Maa't. So it's talking about, right, this construct of a law. And so we know we're not, the ancient commandments weren't talking about the law of man, unless the law of man was in alignment with the law of Maa't, which it was in ancient Kemet. But in America, it's the opposite. So this precept is letting us know that it's important, especially if we're trying to get our lives in order and manifest our higher self. Then we have to understand that we have to turn our back, essentially, on the ways of the world if the way of the world goes against the laws of Maa't. So we cannot transgress against the laws of Maa't. And we know that this world makes that kind of difficult. So when we think about that precept, right, and we think about all of this, the transgression in the world right now, right, we all pretty much, for the most part, some of us have heard about the construct of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible, where, those two places had just become riddled with unrighteousness. to the point that God, destroyed the both places, and the only people that were spared were the righteous. And so, when we look at the world today, we can say, especially here in America, we are in these times again. And I'm not saying that this is a true story or a false story. I'm talking about this concept of humanity getting to such a low point, to such a point of degradation, that destruction is imminent, that destruction has to happen. And not from someone sitting in the sky. It happens as a direct result of the things that we put out into the world, right? If we make nuclear bombs and then, one country gets upset and they drop the bomb on the other country, then we create the destruction, right? Because we're not living in accordance to Maa't. And, the transgression is getting so far out there now that sometimes I don't even know if we can dig ourselves out of it. The lowliness and the degradation is so over the top now. I mean, most of you probably are familiar with this whole thing that's going on. This is actually the most I've seen of it. I've heard of it, but you have this image of a young rapper who, in this video, supposedly was sleeping, having sex with the devil. So you can really see how far we've transgressed as a cultural group. And again, in a lot of the pop culture, a lot of the music and the videos that we listen to and our young people listen to is riddled with a lot of low vibratory demonic forces and energy. And people are picking up on it and seeing the subliminal messages that's being conveyed, even by some of our, some of the most beloved artists. And again, I mean, I'm not into this culture, but whenever I peek in and I see certain things, I'm like, whoa, I mean, how low can we go? I mean, the transgression is definitely real. And these are just a few pictures of what's going on out there. If we take some time and look and see what how we're being subliminally seduced through entertainment. That's Rihanna. And so I found this out there. Someone, created this. Our minds have been trained to shut down at the mention of the Creator or God. However, the New World Order is ultimately an occult exercise designed to replace God, or they have reality, but are created with Lucifer, who represents the Illuminati's self-serving rebellion. The cult consists of Kabbalist Jews and Freemasons who proclaim God has no form and is unknowable. They step into the breach and anoint themselves as God. So I wanted to share this because there is a movement, and many of us may not be aware, but Luciferianism is on the rise. And they have been utilizing the media to soften the public so that as it comes out, there won't be any opposition. So in the words of Nas, what kind of spell is mankind under? Right? Apparently we're not under the spell of Maa't. So we must be under the spell of Isfet, right? And Apep, confusion and entropy, right? Entropy, dissolution, degradation. All right. Precept 15. An, Ari, to make, to do, to fashion, to beget, to produce. And that's, even though it's all the way down here, that's just this I. That's Ari. And the rest of these denote Henut, which is evil, profound immorality, and wickedness, especially when regarded as a supernatural force. wickedness, deliberately harmful to people. Also, this construct of fraud and deceit is encapsulated in these hieroglyphs. Then we have I will not make, fashion, beget, do, or create evil or wickedness. I will not commit fraud or deceit. Right? Again, looking at this from a societal level, looking at it from the macro and then micro, fraud and deceit is all around us, right? This country and this government is fraud and deceit at its finest. So I don't know how many of you remember when Joe Biden was running for president, one of the things that he said was he would not make the vaccinations mandatory in the US, right? And a lot of people like that and they voted for him. What is he saying today? Biden mandates vaccines for workers, saying our patience is wear and thin, right? Again, fraud and deceit at its finest. These people have an agenda and they're going to do whatever it takes to carry it out. And if we don't wake up, we are going to, find ourselves on the other end of their stick. It's not just Trump. The U.S. has always broken its treaties, pacts, and promises. And so, they don't really teach all of this in history, but this country has a history of being a lying, deceitful, fraudulent nation. It's went into treaties with people and then reneged on them after they got what they wanted. So again, when we think about the foundation that we're standing on, the foundation that we're standing on is not Maa't, because we are members of this society. And so this is our platform, unless we are getting into a space where we're creating enclaves and separating ourselves, doing things to help change the culture, change the climate. If not, we are a part of it. And so we live in a society, right? A culture of evil and wickedness. And that precept is talking about not partaking in this. It's shrouded in deceit and founded upon fraud. So when we look at all of the major systems in this country, we will find the deceit. We will find the wickedness in it, the educational system, the religious system, the media, political, judicial. And, for a lot of us, we know this already. But the question is, how can we start doing things to start swaying and pushing the pendulum back towards Maa't, right? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves and begin finding ways to do it. And so when we look at the foundation of this country, which is the culture that we were incarnated into, we are dealing with generations of people that are known to be enemies of Maa't. They don't hide it. They show us who they are. They tell us who they are with no apology, but we act like we don't want to believe it. And then you have those of us who buy into their system, and then we become their puppets. So this is, I don't know if any of you heard of Pastor Eddie Long, but when I lived in Georgia, I had visited his church one time, and I got a chance to meet him. Someone introduced me to him, and I remember him asking me, what did I do for a living? And I thought that was a really strange question for someone to ask me, the pastor that asked me, meeting me for the first time. And then I was like, oh, I know why, because he wants to know if I'm going to be able to help him continue to buy those black diamonds and, all his bling bling. And so even in Atlanta, I knew that he would frequent the party scene on Saturday night, and then you would see him in the pulpit on Sunday. And I could clearly see that he was, hungover most of the time. And I remember one time someone calling me, and they were like, you got to turn on the TV. Eddie Long is on there preaching, and he's calling everything evil Egypt. And so I turned it on, and he sure enough was. He was like, your kids acting up, Egypt. Your boss getting on your nerve, Egypt. Your money ain't right, Egypt. And I was like, wow. And I literally wrote him a letter. That's all I could do, right? Wrote him a letter, explained to him how that was not in divine alignment. Never heard back from him. But anyway, later on, he was all over the news because of this deceit and this wickedness, the stuff that he was doing, supposedly molesting younger boys and using them, using his power and his money, right, to persuade them to do sexual favors for him. But who came in his deepest and darkest hour to comfort him? Right? I mean, right in our face. George W. Bush came right in to comfort him, to say, yeah, even though you are a fraud, you are, you're definitely doing wicked things, you are in alignment with what we are about. And we want you to stay in this position because you are one of our puppets. And yet people continue to give so much money to these types of organizations. And these organizations don't give anything back to the community. So I want to shift a little bit into the other side of the wickedness and the evil supernatural warning that precept speaks to.
Alo? Poți să mă suni mâine ca să spun Simona totul ce am văzut, da?
These days, much of the family witch business is done on the phone or online.
So you can do like long distance witchcraft.
Da, este adevărat. Și din Anglia, și din Anglia.
All they need are the first names of those involved and the spell they want.
Are you worried that modern times will change this ancient craft?
Nu poate să afecteze. Din contră, face în așa fel ca să află tot globul că există puteri și să creadă lumea.
What was witchcraft like when you were a kid?
Era mult diferită. Era mai rar că le cereau să faci rău la cineva. Multe erau pentru spor, pentru realizări, pentru căsătorie, pentru a le merge bine. Dar acum cel mai mult e rău să faci rău la dușman, la ăla.
And that's when Bratsar invites me to the kitchen to cook up a curse.
Asta e pentru despărțire, pentru văr, să pune piper aici, pentru bătaie, pentru să se urască unul pe altul, să fugă.
And so I wanted to share that because this woman in Romania, she gave some insight into witchcraft, and she was asked by by the interviewer, how has it changed? And she said initially, back in the day, it was used basically for good, right? But now she's getting a lot of work for people to do the opposite. So a lot of people are now even getting into witchcraft and using it to do things that are hateful or evil or wicked, right? Which falls under that precept to other people. And this woman is actually really well off. She makes a lot of money doing this kind of work. And she said in the interview that a lot of her work is to break people up, to cause harm to other people. And so when we look again at American culture and the entertainment, if you just Google occult movies, there's like hundreds of evil occult film, right? And they're showing us who they are. And I showed you that picture of the bloodlines of the presidents and other key movers, people in powerful positions in this country and throughout Europe. And they are members of occults like Skull and Bones. And then again, like I said, they will create movies and show us what they're about, but we don't really take them seriously. But yet when you look at the world, apparently the world is being controlled and being pushed into this very low vibration, this deep degradation. And so again, when we're looking at that precept, we want to look at it from a macro, from a bird's eye view, and then bring it home. So interestingly enough, I wanted to tie that into African spirituality as well, because nowadays a lot of people will watch all the white witchcraft, all their witcher movies, their demonic movies, And we don't realize how we're being seduced, and in some cases actually influenced by it. But back in the day, they actually used these muzzles and they put them on the faces of certain slaves. And it's interesting because when I was trying to do some research on it, I got this from PBS. When persons being held as slaves were accused by their masters of insubordination or of eating more than their allotment of food, they might expect to be fitted with an iron muzzle. So if you just read this without doing any further investigation, you would just believe it's coming from PBS. But this is another example of deceit and how they cover up things, because these types of muzzles were not to stop you from eating. And when you look at anything going back to the Dark Ages of Europe, they also used these type of muzzles during the witch period when they were burning witches at the stake and things like that. And so when you start researching from that perspective, they're not talking about, oh, we don't want people to eat. It was, we don't want them to utter anything. We don't want them to speak. So, let the women be silent in church. When you read that article, it talks about the women who were considered witches, people who could chant and say things that, would cause you to be sick or die or anything like that. Kind of like the Romanian woman, right? The witches. So since they use those on Africans, when you dig deeper, you find that, oh, yeah, so there were Africans that were able to speak words of power that could actually cause the oppressor or the slave master or whoever was oppressing them to become sick, or in some cases to even die. And so if you were suspected of that, then you would have this kind of iron muzzle placed on your mouth, and there would actually be something that goes into the mouth to stop the tongue from uttering that would cut up your tongue, because they didn't want to lose property. So they just figured, well, we have to find ways to control those that may have that ability. And so those people would typically be the priest or priestess or students who were studying words of power and things like that from different tribes when they brought them over. And that was one of the reasons why they made speaking in our language illegal, because they did not want us passing on, spiritual knowledge and information. They didn't want us passing on anything that would allow us to be able to stand up for ourselves and stand against them. And so even though all throughout America and all throughout Europe, we see that there's, this plethora of the occult movies, people doing magic. You can go on Google and all kind of people are teaching you how to do magic and cast spells. But yet in Jamaica, they have a law that goes all the way back to 1898 that prevented Jamaicans from practicing obeah. And obeah is a form of African traditional religion that came from Africa. And again, it was used to protect, right? To help us stand up against our oppressors. And so that's why it became illegal. You couldn't even practice it. They wanted to eradicate it. But it's interesting how it's, it's still in effect today in Jamaica. But yet people, like I said, in European countries are clearly doing all types of magic and evil and things of that nature. So anyway, I wanted to share this. And it's interesting because even today, the government considered removing this and not making it illegal anymore. But the backlash came from the people. Many Jamaicans vocally stated their opposition to repeal on the grounds that obeah is evil. So again, they somehow took what was good, right, and painted it to be evil. And now we look at them doing their stuff all over TV and we're fantasizing about it. So that's why I have here, when evil becomes good and good becomes evil. So if you use your spiritual work, your spiritual knowledge to stand up for yourself and to protect yourself from people who are on Maa't, people who go against Maa't, then it's evil, right? But it's okay when the oppressor use spells and magic and evil and wickedness to control you. So just something I wanted us to, keep in mind as we move forward. And so the ancient Kemetans, right, the Egyptians, were very powerful magicians or priests, those who studied to be that. And so here's a quote from Herodotus, the Greek historian. The Egyptians were beyond measure scrupulous in all matters pertaining to spirituality. So he witnessed, and of course, he didn't get into the inner sanctum, but what he saw was these people were truly spiritually evolved, and they were, utilizing spirituality for the betterment of themselves and humanity. He had eaten the knowledge of every neter god, and that's the pyramid text. So of Suten, which is King Unas. And so he was one of the revered kings, and many of the Sutens or kings in ancient Kemet and the queens, they went through a long process of purifying because they had to resurrect their higher self so that they can lead from a place of Maat. And that is why they were able to create the societies in which they created. And when you look at the artwork, you see them becoming one with all of those divine principles and attributes of the Neteru, which are aspects of the Creator. And that is how they were able to live in over 10,000 years of peace and prosperity. The evil came from external. It was external. It didn't come from within. And so just, bringing home the concept of there's only two ways we can go at this. Either we're going to be on Team Isfet, which is, the whole demonic team, destroying the earth, right? Going against Maa't or Team Maa't. And so a lot of people are fantasizing and trying to become a part of Team Isfet, right? I showed you all the artists joining forces with them to help convey and keep us under their spell. But then you have the few of us that are trying to stand up for Maa't, right? And so we would consider this team people who follow Set, and then this team people who follow Asar. So you can look at the images and see that this is about death and this is about life, because this is resurrecting the soul to its highest self. All right, precept 16, the last precept. An au, to injure, to do violence, to break, to plunder, to reap grain. Then we have henepti, which is land, field, arable land. So that's land that is cultivatable. I will not destroy, injure, right? Pollute, plunder. And plunder means the violent and dishonest acquisition of property, land, earth, grain, or crops. And so this is very important when we think about plundering, because we've heard all the time about the conquistadors and robbing, raping, and pillaging, plundering, doing all those things, and they actually celebrate that. I've had to sit through many history classes and hear professors and students revel about how their ancestors came about acquiring America and other parts of the world. So when we think about that precept again, we want to start looking out at society, the society that we're living in and supporting. And so this is the insignia for Monsanto. And so for those of you who are not familiar with Monsanto, they are a genetically modifying food company. So they have done a lot of horrific things. They've thrown off the ecosystem. They've bankrupt organic farmers. And that precept speaks against this kind of activity. In 2017, Monsanto had told asset worth of 21 billion, approximately 21 billion US dollars. And as I said, Monsanto is an agricultural company specialized in genetically engineering seeds. And I've talked about them. If you're not familiar with them, you should become familiar with them so that you can know how to avoid supporting them. So a lot of products that contain corn, if it's not organic or have the non-GMO symbol, they are purchasing their corn from Monsanto. So one of the things that I do is I almost never buy things that don't have the non-GMO stamp on it or that's not organic. I make an effort to read the packages so that I'm not supporting this, right? That's how we take an individual responsibility when we're trying to, again, help tip the scale. You know, we have fracking. For those of you who are not familiar with fracking, it's removing the natural resources. Most of the time, it's oil these days from the earth and leaving the earth on top of it, in some, you know, in many cases, destroyed or desolate. A lot of people aren't even aware that when you purchase a home in many parts of America today, you are not getting your mineral rights. You only are purchasing the above ground rights. You can build a house on there and live on there, right? Because of this greed, there's been a whole lot of deceit and, you know, mishandling. So you have a lot of companies that actually own mineral rights to residential property and residential land. And they can come at any time and start digging up and fracking if they already haven't depleted the land of its natural resources. Then we have the landfills, right? Pollution, that Precept talked about the pollution. This is something that's very common. You have large companies that go into beautiful rainforest areas or other countries and they dump their toxic waste there. And so this company, Chevron, is one that we want to put on our list because if you don't know, they are big for going into smaller countries and dumping their toxic waste. So this sign shows you that 1,400 people have died from oil pollution in Ecuador. So these people out here holding these signs and doing stuff, they are actually moving, right, in alignment. They're trying to push the scale, right? They're trying to tip the scale towards Maa't. So kudos to them. 18.5 billion gallons of toxic oil waste dumped in the Amazon. Chevron again. So if we don't care about this stuff and we don't take time to find out what's going on, then we pull up at gas stations and don't really think about what gas station we're pulling up at. So because I know about this, I've known about it for many years, I'm not going to Chevron unless it's the only gas station around and I'm like on E and I have to go there and then I'm not filling up. I'm putting in just enough money to get to the next gas station, right? So these, again, like I said, there's a whole lot of ways that we are co-contributors, that we're contributing to the demise, right? Something as simple as I'm not buying Chevron gasoline is a way, right, that we can make a change on our level. We may not shut down Chevron, but at least we are energetically doing what's required to go against what they're doing, right? To go against the enemies of the creator. Chevron is an American oil company that has a market cap net worth of $190 billion. We could bankrupt them in a week, right? If this information got out to enough people cared about this, they're not the only gas company. We could literally put them out of business because of their ill practices and their Maa't practices. Them and any other company that's doing it, but Chevron is a major violator. So again, these are the things that we want to be aware of so that we can try to do something to push towards Maa't. And then when we think about this whole concept of seizing land, right, that Precept talked about that. You're not supposed to plunder. And again, we're living in a country, we're living in a culture that was founded off of that. And so if we're not speaking out against it and we're not, standing up against it, who will? Luckily, people are starting to do it. I mean, they're actually, vandalizing signs and putting things up like this, stop celebrating genocide, right? People are moving to have these signs taken down, right? So we want to be doing something to try and help tip the scale. Something as simple as not supporting Thanksgiving. How many of us still buy turkeys and sit down and do this whole thing? And it's so interesting. People say, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. And then you call them on that day and they got all family sitting around eating. But I'm like, it's Thursday, it's the third Thursday in November, and you're sitting around doing all this cooking and stuff, but you're not, because you don't call it Thanksgiving, they don't care what you call it. You are feeding it that energy, right? You're spending your money, you're supporting this, genocidal holiday. Again, it's on a simple way, right, to make a contribution. What we do with my family is we don't do anything on that Thursday, but we like to take advantage of the food sales. This year they didn't have any, and we usually shop on Friday, and we have our family day on Saturday or Sunday because a lot of people are off from work and things like that. So you can make modifications and still not give this day any energy, not positive energy. We can talk about what it's really about. So just, if we took a moment to envision what the world would be like today, if just this one precept had never been violated, right? If the conquistadors and Christopher Columbus, and if everyone knew we don't plunder, right? We don't pillage. We don't go and take land from people and not, we don't move like that because it's not Maa't. The world would be totally different. Right? There would be no land wars. Look, how many people have died because people wanted to take their land, right? We wouldn't be dealing with the colonization. And can you imagine what the world would be like if nothing was ever colonized? Africa would be on fleek, if you can even still say that right now, right? No land pollution, right? No extinction of native tribes. And this is just a few things. So again, when we look at the wisdom of the ancient ones, of the Kemetans, right? The Kemeti who wrote these precepts, they knew that they would be the very things that stop us from driving ourselves into oblivion, driving ourselves into destruction, driving ourselves into misery, which is what we have done now as a collective, right? There's so many ways that we are being negatively impacted on an individual, personal level, because Maa't is not being even attempted to become, the way of life in the world or in this country. And then on a societal level, how we're suffering, how the planet is suffering, how the ozone layer is suffering, how the animals are suffering, right? All because of not living in accordance to Maa't. So, in summation, I encourage all of us, right? I am not here to pontificate. I'm here to share, and I practice what I teach. So, what I do is I use my witnessing consciousness to watch myself, to see what I'm doing, and trying to find ways to make sure I'm staying on Team Maa't as much as I can possibly do it within the confines of this societal structure that we have found ourselves in. So just some things to encourage all of us, right? Use the hidden aspect of your own mind that bears witness to negativity stemming from you through your thoughts, feelings, speech, and actions to identify your ISFET contributions. And ISFET, again, is dissolution, confusion, right? Everything that goes against Maa't. Identify and remember the precepts that you have violated and work on correcting those. Identify ways in which you are influenced by society and socially to violate them. Right? If you have people that's trying to get you to do things that's against Maa't, you know, you want to take note of that. You may have to start changing how you move with those kind of people. If you're watching certain things on TV or listening to certain music that's influencing you to behave a certain way, you may want to make some modifications to what you're taking in. Begin gently working to transform the negativity into positivity. And again, we want to be gentle with ourselves, right? We are just simply trying to do better day by day without killing ourselves or stressing ourselves out. So we do it from a place of love and peace. And these will prove helpful when moving in alignment with Maa't, right? The world didn't get the way it is overnight. We didn't get so far removed from our divine selves overnight. And so we won't climb over to the other side. We won't manifest our highest self overnight. But if we are doing a little bit every day, we can definitely leave the world in a better place than we found it. And we can leave the world in a better place in which we came in. So we will evolve spiritually so that our next journey will be even more delightful and pleasant. All right. So with that, for those of you who made it through to the end, adorations to the divinity in you. That's what dua means for watching. Do anyone have any questions? If you have any comments or questions, you can drop it in the chat. I just want to say thank you to, I see Josh, I see Yoki, I see Turquoise, Majesty, I see Akur Atunre, I see Quarian Paris, I see Asada Ali. Let me scroll up a little bit. Thank you all for sharing your time and your space and your energy with me. All right. Well, I hope you all found something that you can deem useful from this talk as we all continue to strive to help make the world a better place, starting within and then moving without. So big dua. So we will have the next talk in 2 weeks, and hopefully we will go through the next 5 precepts in that talk. Ankh Uja Seneb, Life, Vitality, Health. Mer Aki, Hetep, Love, Joy, and Peace. Hetep. Thank you, Asada. I appreciate you as well. Dua Akur.